EVs are fundamentally more convenient. You can charge them at home. They have really long ranges. You hardly have to worry about kind of charging them while you're out. They're cleaner, they're quieter, they're more tech forward. The only one use case where they're any inferiority is that 1 or 2 trips you'd make a year where you're driving between cities or between states and you have to stop to plug in. But even that has gotten so good.
Welcome to $100 Million Blueprint. We're your hosts, Jonathan Ferrari and Neil Cuggy, the founders of Goodfood.
In each episode, we share lessons learned from being owners and co-owners in businesses valued over $290 million. No fluff, no corporate jargon, just actionable advice that works.
All right, welcome to $100 Million Blueprint, the podcast where we uncover how elite businesses scale while staying true to their values. Today's guest spotted an opportunity most people couldn't see yet. Back when EV meant just Tesla, he bet big, not on building cars, not even on making chargers, but on the invisible layer powering the entire ecosystem. And that bet is paying off big. Zak is the co-founder and CEO of ChargeLab, the software company quietly running 80% of popular EV chargers out there today. We're talking a scrappy startup going toe-to-toe with giants and landing deals with ABB, Siemens, and Delta, and raising over $30 million to change how the EV world charges electric vehicles. So welcome to the show, Zak. I thought a cool place to start is you've raised over $30 million, and you must have gone in and out to a bunch of VC meetings and investor meetings. Can you tell us a little bit about the pitch and the story that you were able to tell them to get them to believe in you and your company and raise that kind of money?
Absolutely. First of all, it's great to be here and be hanging out again with you guys, Jonathan and Neil. ChargeLab, maybe just a quick introduction about what we do. We make software for managing EV charging stations. We don't build any EV chargers. We also don't own and operate the EV chargers you might find in the ground at a gas station or a grocery store near you. But we provide technology to all these folks that let them connect and manage their EV chargers. And so a very simple example is if you stop along the highway at a charger owned by one of our customers, you may pull out your phone to make a payment with Apple Pay or your credit card. You might tap a credit card on the charger. But in all cases, we're kind of processing that payment on the back end. We give a dashboard to that owner of that charger. We call them a site host, and they can kind of track all the usage and the revenue from the chargers. And then we try to create a really great experience for EV drivers because, as you kind of alluded to, Tesla set the gold standard by when they released their car, they built a massive charging network and made it super easy for people to use the charging network. On the other side of the aisle, it's not quite the same. You don't have EV charging networks built by Volkswagen and Audi and Ford and GM, but we're helping build out that network. And so we also have a huge focus on building better experiences for EV drivers. When we were out raising capital, I think it was really a story about the market. I think anytime a startup founder is pitching their business, there's a couple things you need to get right. You need to have the right team, you need to have the right product and solution and problem. But I find actually often what VCs are looking for is they're validating the market. Is this market big enough? Or in the case of ChargeLab, is the market growing fast enough? And what all of our investors saw and what I personally saw and my co-founder saw was that the EV charging market is not massive today, but it's growing very, very quickly. When we started the business, it was very small. We had a hypothesis that it would grow very quickly, and it has, and it's continuing to scale. Now, that doesn't mean there's not ups and downs along the way, but I think what really attracted investors to this business was, hey, in North America today, there's hundreds of millions of gas vehicles. Over the next several decades, almost all of those are going to get converted to electric vehicles, and they're going to need somewhere to plug in and charge. And that's ultimately the technology that we provide.
It's incredible how much you've accomplished in the past 5 years, basically, right? Since 2020. And Neil and I have been rooting for you along the way. So tell us a bit about where ChargeLab is today in terms of like employees, revenue growth, kind of number of chargers, whatever you can share to kind of help us situate the incredible progress your team has made over the past 5 years.
Absolutely. So we're around 50 full-time employees today. We have a headquarters here in Toronto, Canada, and most of our software engineering team is on site here in Toronto. And I'm at our headquarters today. Behind me, you've got our test lab where we bring in real electric vehicles and we plug them into EV chargers and we test that everything's working. But we've also got a distributed sales force across the US. So about 10 employees in the US, including the bulk of our sales team. We are now managing well over 10,000 EV chargers, quite close to 15,000 devices actually. And what that means is at gas stations, in condo buildings, in office buildings, these property owners have chosen to install EV chargers and then connect them to our software to manage all their payments, their billing, their energy utilization, and a whole bunch of interesting features. And to kind of just give you an idea, of the scale, we started with 0 chargers 5 years ago. About 3 years ago, we hit our first 1,000 devices connected, and so we've grown 10 or 15x in the last 3 years. You may see the ChargeLab brand when you go out and you charge your car at different sites, but we also do a lot of white labeling. So we power some of the largest big networks in North America, and when you pull up, you would see their brand. I mean, here in Ontario, one example is the IV charging network. So they're along all the large highways. You pull off, they have a gas station and they have charging stations. And, it'll say IV charging station. You'll use an app called the IV app. But this is one of our customers. And we do this with over 20 white label partners in North America.
That's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the stuff, if you rewind back 5 years when you were originally thinking about the idea and pitching the original investors to today? Like, the industry's changed so much. It's so dynamic. What did you get right? What surprised you? What do you think's gone faster or slower in the industry? Like, a lot of the people that we speak with on the podcasts are from established industries where there's not that much change, and the change that is happening is being created kind of at the margin by hopefully by the people that we have on the show. But your industry was nascent and continues to be at the early phases of adoption. So can you kind of talk through some of the stuff you think you saw and got right versus just completely shocked you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go back to 2020, there were less than 2 million EVs on the road in the US and Canada. And by the way, we're focused on North America. That's our core market. And this year, by the end of the year, we're probably going to hit close to 10 million EVs on the road. So in the last 5 years, the number of EVs on the road has grown by 5x. And from a market share perspective, it's gone from, a small percentage of new vehicles sold to now across all of North America, 1 in 10 cars sold is an electric car. Neil, I know you've switched to an electric car, and Jonathan, if not, we'll get you in one soon. But in places like British Columbia and Quebec and California, it's almost 20 or 25% of new vehicles purchased are electric due to incentives and things like that. The thing that we got right was picking the right industry, right? Like, this is a growth industry. They need technology solutions, and the kind of incumbents aren't necessarily going to be super good at building software. We partner with a lot of big companies that build EV chargers. You mentioned some of them, ABB, Siemens, folks like that. And we love working with these companies because they're really good at hardware. They don't have as much of an innate ability on the software side, so we complement them really well. And I think that's another thing we did well of saying, hey, we're not going to try to build an EV charger. Let us focus on the software layer and partner with the other EV charger manufacturers. I think if there's anything, we could have done differently, like there was a huge surge of interest in this industry over COVID, right? People were staying home more. They didn't want to go to gas stations. There's a risk of transmission. So being able to have an EV and charge at home was very attractive. EV sales did incredibly well during COVID. And then Biden was elected, right? And there's a ton of policies in the US that was very EV forward. And so we were successful in raising a ton of capital. And then we kind of got the idea that, EVs are about to be around every corner, so we better invest and build out a product that's really ready for hundreds of thousands of EV chargers. And all in all, I'm glad that today we have a really, really robust and mature product. But if we could do it all again, I think this is my first time running a venture scale, really large business. And I find second time, third time founders can be a little bit more measured. They'll raise money at that peak time where everyone's interested in the industry, like EVs or AI or cryptocurrency. But then they'll be really careful and really strategic and say, hey, I'm not going to overinvest right now. I'm going to seek out kind of validation from the market. So, I think all in all, we could have just taken a more measured approach. Our peak headcount was, 15 or 20 more employees than we had today. So we went all the way up to, 65 or 70 before we said, you know what, actually, we're better with a leaner, more elite team of 50 people. But if we could go back and do it all again, maybe we would have just, stayed at 50 the whole time, not been overreactive to how much support there was for EVs and just watch the numbers carefully. I think there's a little bit of a story of two worlds where you have a US president and administration who is kind of vocally not that supportive of electric vehicles, right? But on the flip side, EV sales are still growing, right? And we can talk a little bit about why that's happening and why EVs are going to win at the end of the day. But, it's always nice to have extra capital on hand when you see that steady growth in the market. But now the media narrative is a little bit different. Ultimately, what we want to do is just keep our heads down and keep building the best business we can.
That idea of having a smaller but more mighty team really resonates with us. We talk a lot about Reed Hastings' book, No Rules, Rules, right? And one of the things that comes up in his philosophy is the concept of talent density, right? Like how a small team with the highest talent density always wins versus a bigger team. So how did you what were the things that led you to that conclusion of, I want to have a smaller team? How did you make the decision? And then what kind of challenges did you have in implementing it?
I think kind of the natural state of a company, especially when you have funding, will just be to grow, right? Because there's always a ton of really important work to do. And you sign a big new customer and you're like, oh, shoot, we should add someone to our account management team or our customer support team, to support this new customer. And then you have another big customer that asks for this feature and you're like, oh, we should go hire some more developers to build this feature because all our other developers are busy. But I think the downside of that is at some point you lose focus, right? And, the reality with any kind of product-driven company is the vast majority of your customers are going to engage with a few key features. For us, it's the ability to monetize your chargers in all sorts of ways, credit card, Apple Pay, all sorts of things like that. It's energy management because EV chargers actually do take a lot of power and that's really critical. But beyond that is really uptime and reliability. Like the number one thing is not building the fanciest report or integrating with every last thing that you could integrate a EV charger dashboard into. It's just making sure these chargers are online and reliable. And so I think, it happened gradually over time. But as we looked at all the projects we were working on, we came back to our core and said, look, are we making it easier and more affordable for folks to install EV chargers? Are we keeping the chargers online and improving reliability? And ultimately, are we helping our customers run more profitable businesses because they're the ones outlaying large amounts of capital to install the chargers? And if it's not one of those core focused things, then it's a bit of a distraction. And so just kind of getting back to focus and what are we really good at has been really powerful for the company, for aligning us, for everybody knowing exactly what we're working on and what the next big milestone is in product or in sales or in growing the company. And then there's also just this kind of communication overhead, which is just a reality of human beings, where the more of them you put in an organization, the more kind of communication nodes you have. And so if you can, rather than adding that additional kind of customer success resource, if you can equip your existing customer success people with more automation or better tools that let them do the job better, then there's just going to be, fewer handoffs between different team members.
So that brings me to...
I knew you were going.
So, anyone who's sat down with Neil and I knows how passionate we are about cultures that embrace AI. We talk a bit about how not every company needs to be building their own AI, right? But every single company in every industry at every stage of growth needs to be thinking about how to create a culture that embraces AI. And I was just reading one of the LinkedIn posts that ChargeLab put up a couple of weeks ago around how you had set up these hackathons with team members from all sorts of different departments, not just the tech team, right? And like, obviously, we've seen software engineers using AI to code more productively and better, and it's amazing. But outside of the pure tech team, using it for sales and product development and customer success. Can you tell us a bit about how you set that up? What did you do in the hackathon? How did you set it up? What were some of the key outcomes? What did you learn from it? Like, we're really interested in that.
And specifically around like the non-technical teams as well. Like it's something that we see a lot of interest in inside the company and with other founders that we speak with, of people that are using it, whether for creative work or proofreading or stuff like that. Like, there's some of the basic levels of stuff, but the full levels of automation and using some tools that actually like empower employees to do more accurate work would be really interesting.
Well, look, first on AI overall, like I think Jeff Bezos has the best quote on it, where he said it's like electricity. It's just going to be everywhere. And I think that's a good analogy, for a couple of reasons. Like, one, electricity made factories and workers so much more productive when you could go from, sewing a shoe by hand to using an electric sewing machine to make that shoe. You can make 10 times more shoes. But I think another part of the analogy that really holds is like, you flash forward, 20, 50, 100 years, and, we don't really talk about, like, you guys run Goodfood, and we don't talk about, we get the food out of the electric refrigerator, and then we put it on, in the electric mixer and, the electric dicer. It's like the electric word actually just disappears because it becomes so ubiquitous. And I think that's going to happen with AI. Like, I think we call it AI-powered email and AI-powered document editing and AI-powered all of these things. And I think 20 years from now, people are just, oh yeah, send me an email. And that in that statement, you're going to imply that, you're going to run all your points by the AI and it'll refine them and make them clearer and then send it out, right? And so, we're really trying to embrace that and be like an AI native company. And I actually think at ChargeLab, we fall into both categories. We're both we're both building AI products, which I'll touch on, and then we're using AI in our company operations. So the AI products we're building, which are really cool, is we deal with these vast swaths of information. We connect thousands of devices that are pinging us every couple of minutes, in some cases, other cases, every couple of seconds. So we're dealing with hundreds of millions or billions of messages between an IoT device and our backend. And we've built some really cool AI tools that we're now giving to our customers that allow them to monitor the network of EV chargers and look for irregularities. So, is this charger behaving in a way it's not supposed to? Is it falling offline more than it should? Are users encountering errors? And so we've announced that publicly. We call it Spark AI, and it's an amazing tool that our team has shipped. And then at the same time, we are becoming an AI native company where we're using AI for our own internal processes. So, Jonathan, you mentioned a bunch of things. Like, we actually use it on everything. We use it for our outbound sales, right? We improve our sales messaging and do automated outreach. We use it to kind of streamline our internal operations. We use it to write code with Cursor and Windsurf and Claude Code and all of these tools. We use it to QA our code, right? And then at this hackathon, what was really amazing to see is we've actually built APIs in our platform. So there's all sorts of things you might want to do in our platform, like add a new charger, create a charger, update its firmware, send a report. And many of these things exist in our UI, but because we're an early stage startup, some of them don't. Like, we have, for our customers who are adding a handful of chargers, we have a nice UI where you can go add 10 chargers at a time. But if you want to add 1,000 chargers to the system, usually you just send us a CSV and we upload that. And so at the hackathon, we built a tool that utilized our API and ChatGPT to parse the data and go add 1,000 chargers to the back end. And something that would have otherwise been done manually, you can just now do through an LLM and a chatbot. And I think what really changed my thinking there is it was so easy to build these chatbots for those edge case uses. Like, of course, we're going to have ability to add 10 or 20 chargers from our dashboard because that's what most of our customers do. But adding 1,000 or 10,000 chargers to the system might be such an infrequent task that it doesn't actually make sense to build a UI, but rather just build a chatbot that can like walk you through all the steps and check for errors and actually be better at that. And then I think the last thing I'll say is like, I think the thing that we need in this age of AI is a human sense of taste and judgment. And so, we want to be using AI to respond to inbound sales leads, but only when it improves the outcome, right? If the customer who wants to buy our services or buy charging stations has to go back and forth a bunch of times and it doesn't feel really smooth, we won't ship that AI. We'll test it internally and say, this is not good enough yet. And so I think as companies all rush to adopt AI, and I think they should, it's also important to have a sense of human judgment and taste, because I think we've all experienced this. Like, nothing is more annoying than a LinkedIn comment or an email reply that was clearly written by ChatGPT, right? There's certain places where I like engaging with AI. Like if I'm on tech support and the AI can actually explain it better to me than a human could, because it's a very technical thing and I have a certain type of computer on a certain kind of Wi-Fi connection and it can digest that and present me an accurate response, that's great. But if, I don't like getting AI messages that feel like they're AI and don't feel customized to my specific use case. And so we really try to preach that at our company, that if we're going to ship an AI process or product or support agent, that it's going to be as good or better than a human would be at that initial interaction. And we find the right place to hand off between the chatbot and the human.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned on outbound sales as well that you guys have automated some of the flows there. Like, how long did it take you to kind of feel comfortable with some of the outreaches? And obviously the other thing that on our end for our outbound small B2B operation, the thing I think about is how much top of funnel automation do you actually want that you can handle once you get the right level of messaging and output at the top of the funnel. So can you talk maybe a little bit about that one as well, given almost every business has an outbound sales function? I think it could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really that bar is like, can this AI process do it better than, a kind of entry level person would at this point? And also working collaboratively with our teams, like talking to our sales team and being like, what do you guys really love doing and what do you not love doing? And then being like, you know what I hate doing like cold calling and outbound. But I love when after I've done the cold call and someone says, yes, I'm interested, I love jumping on the call and giving them a demo and connecting face to face and showing them how we can help them achieve their goals. And so I think, my recommendation would be, rather than kind of, steamrolling in and say, hey, we're going to replace this function entirely with AI, actually work with those people in that function, because they're going to understand what part of it they don't like the least, what part of it is the least personal. Because I think with a lot of outbound email sequences and outreach and things like that, when humans were doing it, it was literally just copy pasting. Because if you have to email 100 cold leads a day, you're not going to have time to customize everyone. So yeah, I think just like working with the people who are hands-on. Like at our company, AI is a bottom-up effort. It's not top-down. It's not our management team coming and saying, guys, the AI is taking your job, move aside, here you go. It's really going to the people who are doing these tasks on the ground and being like, hey, how can we make you more efficient with AI? How can we get you doing more of what you love? Because at the end of the day, when you look at sales and anything that's solution selling, like we sell to large gas station chains, to utilities, to big, condo developments, there is a human element to getting across the line. And that's where our salespeople love spending their time. And where they don't is where we bring in the AI.
Yeah, it makes sense. And maybe shifting a little bit onto the away from the AI side and onto the sales side, one of the things that I was always super impressed with was, scrappy Canadian startup based in Toronto was able to convince these massive, giant industrial businesses, ABB and Siemens and others, to do business with ChargeLab. Can you talk through a little bit of some of the learnings through that process and kind of being did you ever feel mismatched in terms of the meetings, or did you feel like, you guys are the experts on the hardware and we think we can add a lot of value on the software side, and maybe talk about some of the lessons that could be helpful to the listeners?
Yeah, so we've worked with a lot of big strategic partners because, we made the decision early on that we weren't going to build EV chargers. We were going to build a network management layer that sits on top of them. And for that reason, we often say that we're the Android of EV charging, right? Tesla is kind of like Apple. They build the car, they build the charger, they build the charging network. We want to provide the software so anyone can run their own network on any different hardware. And then a lot of people who make the hardware are really large companies, ABB, Eaton, Siemens. I think there's a couple step process to working with big corporates as a startup. I think the first and most important thing is patience. They're just going to work at a different speed. And I think you cannot try to kind of force it too quickly. Like many of these partnerships took years to develop, but once they did, were very fruitful for both parties. But I think the kind of critical step is like meeting the right people in the business and understanding their problems. And once you get inside of these big companies and you're talking to the right people, you realize that they actually have like very acute problems because, you know, in the early days, like a good month for us was connecting, 20 EV chargers or 100 EV chargers. Now we're adding thousands every month, but early on, 100 chargers connected was a good month. But that was never okay for ABB because of their side. They were always expecting to sell thousands of EV chargers per month. So they have real problems about, marketing and getting people to know our product, about somebody wants a software to put on top of my charger and I don't have a software to sell, or I don't have a partner that can, do the turnkey installation. And so I think getting in there and really understanding what their problems are and then where you as the startup are uniquely positioned to address them. And I actually think it's very complementary because there are things that we can do as a small software startup that our larger enterprise customers cannot do. And at the same time, there's things they can do that we can't do. What they can do that we can't do is they have reach and they have distribution and they have a brand. Right? If they're selling to the largest, or if we're trying to sell to the largest utility in a state, ABB knows somebody there. They've already sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of switchgear and transformer equipment to them, and we don't have those connections. On the flip side, these large corporations do not have agile software teams that can go say, oh, guess what? There's now these EV chargers. People want an app to be able to use them. And guess what? They don't just want an app. They want to have Apple Pay and, things like that. We can develop that a lot quicker than these companies would be able to develop internally. And so I think it's really about creating that symbiosis between the larger company and the smaller startup, plus being patient and making sure you're talking to the right people. And then finally, I think one of the things that we did that not every company is going to do, but we kind of combined the commercial side with the strategic investment side, where a lot of these partners had had a need for our product, but also were at the back of their mind thinking, maybe one day we would want to build this ourselves. So a great middle ground was like, hey, why don't you invest in us? And now you get ownership in whatever upside and whatever success we create and whatever you help us create. And I think that'll also be quite common with startups and large corporations, where the corporation knows that they're going to be your number one customer, right? And how can a big corporation capture value if they know they're going to all of a sudden kind of turn you from a very small company to a medium or company that actually has some traction? They can make an investment in you, and then they get to share in that kind of upside in the enterprise value they help create.
Did you have a thought partner in coming up with this go-to-market strategy, or can you tell us a bit about the process of coming up with the strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to the genesis of ChargeLab itself. And actually, before, ChargeLab was formed as an entity, I was already getting really interested in the electric vehicle space, almost 10 years ago now. And I effectively started another small business, and we were buying and selling EV chargers. And this is where I kind of encountered the Android problem firsthand, where I saw that, Tesla had all the capabilities to run their chargers and operate a network, and all these other hardware providers didn't. So I think for me, it was just getting into the industry and engaging and saying, okay, who's making the hardware? Who's making the software? Who's doing the installation? And, recognizing that there were quite a few big companies that were making, the hardware, but that the software was not quite the right fit for them. And then just kind of persistently pursuing the partnership from there.
So we like to ask about founders' $100 million vision and blueprint, but I think you might have $1 billion vision and blueprint. So pick whichever number you'd like, but kind of paint a picture for us of what might ChargeLab look like in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at 2030, which is now just 5 years away, we're going to go from a point where today there's about 5 million EV chargers in North America, including all the single family home chargers that are not necessarily connected to software, but might be connected in the future, to somewhere between 15 and 25 million EV chargers on the road by 2030. And, I think very simply for us, if we can connect a million EV chargers and we can make $100 per year on every device, that's our $100 million business. And so, that's what we're building for, right? We are in it for the long term. We're making not only the right investments in our product and technology, but also in these partnerships with these large corporate partners like, ABB and Siemens and Eaton, but also we have some other corporate partners like IV charging network here in Ontario, like Racetrack down in the US is a big gas station chain that uses our software. And our goal, as a company and with our partners is to one day reach 1 million devices connected and be earning over $100 per device per year. And so that's our $100 million blueprint. And then I think the market is going to keep growing from there. And globally, there's one day going to be 1 billion EV chargers deployed. That's roughly the number of vehicles that there are on the road, like 1.5 billion. And over the long arc, the vast majority of passenger vehicles are going to convert to electric, not for any ideological reason, but because it's actually a better technology, right? Anybody who's owned an EV knows you can fill it up at home. It's super easy to maintain. You don't have to change oil. A Honda Civic has like 2,500 moving parts. A Tesla has like 7. And once the cost of batteries come down and the manufacturers are building enough different models, we're looking at total electrification other than very niche products that'll not be EVs in the future. And so, our focus is on 1 million EV chargers in North America over the next, 5 to 10 years. But over a longer arc, we could go global and really address the massive need for connected, smart EV charging and energy devices.
Exciting. And what comes up in your mind as some of the biggest challenges you'll face on that journey?
Yeah, I think in any growing market, there's going to be a ton of like really aggressive competition, so I think we're just going to have to be really sharp and build the best products, stay competitive on pricing and really have the distribution and reach. Because one other thing that's changed in the last 5 years is we've gone from, one of only a handful of companies building what we're building to, there's quite a few now. And that's good. It means there's a market here. There's a lot of customers here. There's enough customers to support, 15, 20 competitors in our core market of North America. But we think ultimately over the long arc, especially in software technology like this, tends to consolidate down to, a top 5 or top 10 players. And so we may explode out even from the 20 competitors we have now to 30 or 40. But then how does that consolidate back into a top 5 or a top 10? And how do we make sure that we are in that top 5 and top 10? And at some point, how are we optimistic about, acquiring and taking over other businesses when we know we have a product that could run on an even larger number of chargers? And that's actually one of the exciting things we've done in the last 6 or 8 months is some of our older legacy competitors have been shutting down and we've actually been stepping in to migrate their chargers and take them over. So I think those are some of the kind of interesting things or challenges that happen along the way to connecting, millions of devices.
Yeah. And you know what? One of the most underrated business strategies that Neil and I have uncovered over the past decade is sometimes being a great competitor is just about avoiding the unforced error and then being able to capitalize on when inevitably the competition or the industry consolidates and someone makes an error. So sometimes it's right. Sometimes it ends up being a little bit less about how far ahead of the competition you can be and more about how you can avoid some of those landmines or unforced errors. And it doesn't sound sexy and it's not necessarily all that exciting, but we just see it time and time and time again.
Yeah, and similar to what you were saying before, Zach, like when you raise the money and you feel pressure from the outside world to do more stuff, build more stuff, hire more people, push harder, it's the exact opposite of all of our kind of entrepreneurial innate reactions in those environments to go faster and bigger and do things. It's like, no, just wait, just watch it all happen, and someone's going to make an unforced error, and you'll start to see them kind of crack and and show signs of weakness. It's also the beauty and the curse of fast growing industries, right? Like the numbers you just quoted for 2030 is what it's like a 30 to 60% compound annual growth rate. Like there's very few industries around the world that are growing that fast. And if the industry is growing that fast, it's going to attract lots of people and lots of smart people and lots of money. And that can be a good thing. And if you're in the right spot and you're around for the next five years as it materializes, there's a good chance there'll be value creation and customers at the end of that tunnel as well. So it's kind of the beauty and the curse of being in a fast growing industry. I'd much rather be in a fast growing industry than a dying industry where you're scraping for every additional kind of dollar and penny and customer that's out there. So it's definitely where you'd rather be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and we certainly hope that all that growth is going to come, and I think it's sage advice to have that steady hand. And and frankly, like, look, this comes back to the focus thing. Who are our customers? How do we serve them really well? How do we make them really happy and find more people like that? And we're at a point now where there has been a lot of kind of people flooding into the market, and frankly, companies doing exactly what we do. We've got 50 people. We've got everything from a company with 12 or 15 people competing with us to a company with 300 or 400 people. And frankly, I worry more about the 12 or 15 person company. They're going to have a more longevity. If they raise some money, it's going to last longer. And so we're trying to be that kind of, punching above our weight. Most of the people we directly compete with probably have double our headcount or more. And, but we're proud of that. Like, we want to be leaner. We want to do more with less. And if anyone ever pushes us on it, when in a sales conversation, investment conversation, we want to be able to say, well, we're just the most focused. We know who we are. We know the value that we're building. And, if someone has double or triple our head count, I hope they raise the bar for the industry and hold us to a high standard. But at the end of the day, they're also going to have a shorter runway and kind of more pressures. And, and you see other things too, where people grow really aggressively by lowering prices and signing a 1-year contract with customers. And then after that year is up, trying to jack up their prices. And I think that can erode a lot of trusts over a 3, 4, 5-year period. Whereas we just try to have a steady hand and say, like, look, whatever you sign with us for today is roughly what you're going to be paying us 5 or 10 years from now, adjusted for inflation. And if we leverage AI and build better technology that can bring your costs down, we're going to do that. So definitely aligned with the steady hand approach and balancing that with kind of pursuing growth.
It used to be a vanity metric, right? Like, how many employees do you have? Or even for managers, like we used to hear a lot of managers talking about their importance in the company was based on how many employees they were managing or how many employees reported into them.
Empire building.
Right. And it's understandable. Like, everybody needs some kind of vanity metric. But the thing we just keep repeating over and over is that used to be the game. Now the game is, how much can you embrace AI for your team to be geniuses, super productive, and delivering better customer outcomes than we could have ever done in the past with a team that's 2 or 3 or 4x the size.
It feels like the cultural shift has happened too, with the public market CEOs talking about headcount reduction with earnings and revenue growth, right? Like Palantir said they're going to do triple the revenue with 10 or 15% less employees. And that was what they were celebrating, which is an interesting cultural shift to be reinforcing from the outside. So I don't know who's trying to empire build anymore in terms of headcount and teams. But we hear a lot of talk about the $1 billion, one man, one woman AI startup, which I think is probably still yet to be at least publicized, if not made. But it seems like a good cultural shift for everyone.
So speaking of cultural shifts, I'm curious to get your perspective on how the European automakers are adapting to this EV shift, right? Like, obviously it's a huge transition for them. They've built businesses around some of the most amazing combustion engine vehicles. How do you see them dealing with this transition?
Yeah, look, I think it is a moment that is similar to smartphones replacing kind of the mobile phones we had before. And what happened in that time is that many people transitioned over. But the deck was seriously reshuffled. Nokia was the world's number one phone manufacturer by far, and now it's Apple and Samsung and Google Pixel. And I think it's a relevant analogy because before there were touchscreen smartphones, Samsung was making, phones as well. But this was their really opportunity to kind of shoot up and become number two. Apple was not. They entered and became number one. They're like Tesla. Tesla's not making cars, 20 years ago, and now they are. And they're the largest EV manufacturer. So I would expect a reshuffling of the deck, and it's hard to predict the future. But I think, some car manufacturers will go bankrupt or get consolidated for failing to make the transition, and others will, come out really successfully. My daily driver right now is a Hyundai Ioniq 5. And this is not the Hyundai that, my grandma drove in the 90s, right? This is like a very cool, tech-forward, slick-looking vehicle. And so I'd give, Hyundai as an example of kind of a winner, at least so far, is doing quite well on EVs. But I mean, look, there's amazing brands, in Europe. So, Audi has electric vehicles, Volkswagen has electric vehicles. They just brought back their camper bus in an electric format, and so I think it's a really invigorating and exciting thing for the car industry that it's a chance for folks to reinvent themselves and go after new target markets. But anytime there's a change like this, there's going to be winners and losers, and I think we're already seeing that.
The other thing I find super interesting is, you're talking about 1 million connected chargers, and we've spent a lot of this podcast talking about vehicles themselves, but, definitely within the next 5 years, if not within the next 10 years, there's a lot more things that will need to be charged by the same network, right? So it actually opens up the TAM quite a bit on the B2B side, on the B2C side, and the number of connected items that need to be charged is going to be just continuously expanding, right? So
you talking about the robots?
I mean, we're talking about Tesla and robots. We're talking about all kinds of other potential use cases that maybe don't even exist today. Like I think the most concrete one that's tangible as a next step is robots.
So do you think you'll be able to use the ChargeLab network for other things than cars?
I mean, I think, first of all, electrification is a mega trend. And when you hear in the news and we talk about electrification, EVs are a big part of it, but it's not just EVs. I just put a heat pump into my house, which is kind of a new version of a furnace that runs on electricity. So instead of a furnace that runs on gas, it does heating with electricity, and it also does cooling. So you have one thing that does your heating and your cooling in your house, and it's super efficient, and the cost is much lower than paying for gas to heat your furnace. So everything's getting electrified like this. I certainly think, candidly, I had not thought about it, but these humanoid robots like the Figure and the Tesla robot, these are going to have battery packs that would benefit from the kind of charging infrastructure we're installing. But the other one that I have thought about that I think is as a phenomenal use case is autonomous vehicles. And so, Waymo is deploying autonomous vehicles in multiple cities in the US today, and they build out these big charging depots where they charge all the vehicles. And, I think Waymo in their pilot phase with, hundreds or thousands of cars can build out a depot. But when you talk about every car becoming autonomous, millions of vehicles in the city being autonomous, people may not own vehicles anymore, but these vehicles are going to need somewhere to charge. And if you go to downtown Montreal or New York or Toronto, there's just simply not real estate to build a mega depot. But you're going to have all these condo buildings and office buildings with all this existing parking where ChargeLab has already installed hundreds of EV chargers. And so rather than, kind of doing a big retrofit, I predict that you're going to have agreements between autonomous vehicle companies and existing real estate providers, big Class A buildings. And you're actually even starting to see this. If you go into the big, condo buildings and office buildings in Montreal and Toronto, the parking lots aren't as full as they used to be, right? People are taking Ubers to work. People are taking public transit. And so there's actually going to be a big availability of space in these parking lots. So we would love to be part of that as autonomous vehicles come into all of our cities. They're looking for places to charge. We say, hey, we've got a network of hundreds of underground chargers that are underutilized. And how do we start to retrofit this so that a autonomous vehicle can get into the garage, pull up itself, get plugged in and refill. But I definitely a huge believer in the electrification of everything. And, especially in places like Quebec, where you have hydroelectricity, in Ontario, we have nuclear. But the entire grid is getting cleaner. There's more solar being installed in Texas than any other power type. And so even these kind of conventionally states where you think of oil and gas are going very big on wind and solar and renewables. And so when it's cheaper, when the device is simpler, like a 7 moving part Tesla versus a 2,500 moving part Honda Civic, electrification just makes a ton of sense. And I'm also kind of the school of thought that human progress kind of charts to energy usage. Before we had electricity, you could kind of measure how much coal we were shoveling into our locomotives and into our homes and things like that. Human quality of life has been directly correlated with using more energy. And so on the margin, while I, of course, believe in turning off the AC when you're not at home and turning off your lights, I think we should be producing drastically more energy and encouraging people to use more energy, to use AI in creative ways, to electrify their homes so they're not using gas to heat their houses, they're using electricity, to electrify their vehicles so they're using electricity to drive around. And so, big fan of nuclear power and clean energy and anything that helps us get more electrons into the system.
Yeah. And speaking of electrification of other things, like Neil and I own an estate, like a wilderness estate in northern Quebec. And so all of the traditional outdoor vehicles and toys, right? Like ski-doos, sea-doos, ATVs, boats, that's all kind of in the early stages of being electrified, which is exciting. And then I think the piece that we're most excited about from Goodfood's perspective is the autonomous deliveries, right? Like using autonomous vehicles to be able to do those deliveries. And that can drive the cost of a delivery down 80 or 90% and make anything delivered be eco-friendly and way more affordable and really compete with the pricing of retail in store. So we're pretty psyched about that. Neil, do you want to close us out on some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, sure. One of the ones we love to ask, Zach, is if you were to have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you guys eat together?
I would love to meet Elon Musk. I think, he's the best business mind of our generation. And I think there's a little bit of like separating, art from the artist, where like Picasso was a fantastic artist, his relationships with women maybe not what would stand up. I think he dated much younger women and married much younger women and things like this. And it's like by modern standards, we might judge that as like a little creepy, but like his art is incredible. And so I think, separating the business from the business person, separating the art from the artist.
Other rapid fire question for you, Zach. If someone wanted to build $100 million company today, what's one of the first moves that you would advise them to make in the starting of that business?
Yeah, I think undoubtedly find somebody with a problem that you think you can solve. And probably in today's day and age, think about how you might solve it with AI. But the foundation of any great business is finding a problem. I need to charge my car. I want delicious meals at home, but I don't have time to coordinate and pick all the ingredients myself. Go find a problem and go validate that it's real. And then step 2 is find somebody who would be willing to pay you to solve it for them.
Yeah, in today's world, you need to get the money. There's the free money of financing is not as easy as it once was, unless you have AI in the
customers
the
are the best
name.
Financing.
Exactly, agree. Yeah. Rapid fire 2. What is your hill to die on in the EV space?
Yeah, I think my hill to die on is that EVs are fundamentally more convenient. You can charge them at home. They have really long ranges. You hardly have to worry about kind of charging them while you're out. They're cleaner, they're quieter, they're more tech forward. The only one use case where there's any inferiority is that 1 or 2 trips you make a year where you're driving between cities or between states and you have to stop to plug in. But even that has gotten so good. And so I refuse to believe that the convenience of filling up on your road trip twice a year is more convenient than being able to fill up at home every night.
Yeah, it feels like a convenient excuse. I mean, I've done road trips in EVs, rented EVs, and it's kids in the car, no, whatever it is. It's worked as good, if not better, most of the time. So, and last one founder that you'd like to trade places with for a day, and just to see how they think, how they operate, kind of what they focus on.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things we do at ChargeLab is we're building technology to power other people's businesses, right? There's folks who go out and own and operate chargers, and they use our software. And there's, office buildings that put chargers in the ground, and it has to align with everything they do. And I think another founder that's built a business all around kind of powering other people's businesses is Patrick Collison with Stripe, and just a huge fan of that business. And I think Stripe is so fascinating because anybody who's in tech and kind of into entrepreneurship knows about this incredible company, but the average person on the street might not, right? And that's something I think about a lot for ChargeLab is, it may be the case that we have a brand that EV drivers are familiar with, or we may just be powering all of the biggest charging networks all over North America or all over the world as a kind of back-end provider. And so that's certainly a company and a founder that's been inspiring for me.
Awesome. Yeah, he's a great choice, and he's also has a great podcast. So,
well, Zach, that's a wrap for today's show. Thanks so much for being with us and engaging in such a wide-ranging conversation. Where should people connect with you if they want to follow you?
Yeah, so personally, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I post a lot about EVs and energy and startups. You can also check out ChargeLab's website, chargelab.co. We're also on LinkedIn and Facebook and all of those places. So welcome you guys to come find us. And any questions about EVs or the grid or energy, feel free to ping me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I will do my best to get back to you.
All right, that's $100 million Blueprint. And until next time,
keep building. That's all for today's episode of $100 Million Blueprint. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It really helps us spread the word to other entrepreneurs and business leaders who need to hear these stories.
Want more behind-the-scenes insights, exclusive content, or have a business question you want answered? Connect with us on LinkedIn to find out more.
Also, don't forget to subscribe and follow $100 Million Blueprint, and to share this episode with your network if you found it valuable, because we're all about growing together. Remember, building a business is tough, but with the right blueprint, you can scale authentically and sustainably.
Thanks again for listening. Keep pushing forward, and we'll see you next time on $100 Million Blueprint.